Good morning, everybody. This is Laura Peterson, your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold, Guaranteed Realty, and to discuss the sale of your home, you can call or text 407-566-2555. That's 407-566-2555. So I do have lots of great stuff to go over today. And first of all, I'm going to start with the stats like I always do. The actual number of homes that sold this week actually went up a little bit. You know, usually at the month end, we always have a spike in the number of homes that sell. What happened this month at the end of the month in June is that basically, you know, the week before the end of the month was higher, and then the 4th of July was also higher because, and the way I figured it is that I thought, hey, you know, basically this is kind of the end of the month because with the holiday, everything kind of gets messed up a little bit. And so both weeks were higher. They were in the 900s for both of them, which normally were in the mid sevens. And so then last week we went back to the mid sevens, so just kind of business as usual. But then this week we're at 811. So not that that's a whole lot more when you start looking at the big scheme of things, but basically it could mean that the market is picking up a little bit and more houses are selling. Now, this is obviously probably about 30 days behind in regards to the reporting, and it's only in the single family homes, and it's not in one particular price point because I did check that out. It's just kind of across the board. And so basically when we're looking at that, that's healthy. What happened when the interest rates went down in our market, or went up and our market kind of stalled several years ago, which I think was about 2022, because we've been kind of holding our own ever since then, is that basically what happened is that the number of houses that sold every week went down about, I want to say, at least a third, if not half. And so it was somewhere in that range. It was a big number that the number of properties that sold went down. And so as a result of that, you know, we were looking at basically that, you know, that's why the inventory started increasing. For all of the sellers out there and everything like that, they're very fortunate that the market didn't tumble at all. The number of houses, there were so many houses that were selling, and it was such a feeding frenzy that there wasn't any inventory out there, that the inventory had to correct itself. And once the inventory corrected itself, we had the right number of houses that were selling, you know, for that inventory is basically what came down to it. And so as a result of that, we're kind of sitting there holding our own in regards to figuring out what's going on in our particular market and everything. So I'm going to break it down by market like I always do and everything, but just looking at it, that there were 811 houses this week that sold, 756 the week before. So it's an additional, you know, 50 to 60. It's somewhere in that range, probably 55. And basically, when it comes down to it, so we haven't been over 800 in forever, and so that's why I bring it to our attention. Now, the condos and townhouses, they stayed very consistent, which will go into that as well. So breaking it down by price point, of the number of sold, there were 79 under 250, 89 between 250 and 300, 235 between 300 and 400, 150 between 4 and 5, 218 between 500 and a million, and 42 over a million. So when you're looking at that, obviously the biggest category is between 300 and 400 in regards to what's going on. The median price of homes that are selling is at 409. And so basically when you're looking at the months of inventory in all the price points, under 250 only has 2.31 months of inventory, and overall we're at 4. The highest is over a million at 6.64, and all the rest of them are hovering quite close to 4. When you're looking at the listing to selling price ratio, we're at 97.8. The highest is between 4 and 5 at 99. The 3 to 4, where we had that the biggest number, that's at 98.4. 95.8 is under 250, which those houses usually need work. So that makes sense. And then over $1 million is at 95.4. Amazing how that low end and high end is always really consistent when we're doing that, right? So when we're looking at the condos and townhouses, they basically stayed pretty consistent. The median price for them is $292,390. So 292 versus 409 is the difference in the median price between a condo and a townhouse. Again, I think we've gone the 5th week in a row without selling anything over $1 million. There's 40 on the market for that condo market. But when you're looking at that between under 250, they're at 62. And basically the 250 to 300 was at 30, 300 to 400, 42, 400 to 500, 29, 6 between 500 and $1 million, and none of them sold over $1 million. Now, of the ones that sold, they're all pretty much right in that 97 range all the way across the board, 97% of asking. And the months of inventory is quite a bit higher. We're sitting at 6.88 versus 4 months of inventory when it comes to the condos. It's 73 average days on the market for the homes and 112 for the condos. So one of the things that I've really noticed that with the people that I'm working with and just looking at what kind of is going on, when the people price their properties correctly, meaning at market price, they're going pretty quickly. And when they price them higher than market price, then they're just kind of sitting there. They're not getting any showings. And what happens is a lot of times is that the seller, maybe 30 to 60 days in or something like that, they decide, hey, I want to lower the price. And so when they do that, then the house goes under contract right away. There's a guy that I'm working with in North Carolina that, he's coming on to our company in North Carolina, and he's selling his house, moving to Pennsylvania. So that's what he's waiting for before he comes to our company. And so even as a realtor, he's not necessarily doing what he needs to do to sell the house. He started his house at $100,000 more than what it is today. And basically, when it comes down to it, he's like, I don't understand why it's not selling and everything. And, I'm like, well, you should know, and we went through all the things that he could do to make his house stand out. And he's done all of those things. And now, after this last $20,000 decrease, he's finally getting offers. He got 2 offers this week. He had 2 showings and 2 offers. So he's at that price where he can now get into a bidding war, get the houses, get the people that are offering more money and all of those kinds of things that he couldn't do before because he was too high priced. And so now he's able to negotiate and actually drive the price up to the market value, which is about where he's at right now. Maybe it's a little bit higher, but he's in the range anywhere where people are looking at it, people are making offers, and they're finding that it's a good deal. And that's honestly what happens. I mean, it is with all the advertising and everything that I do and all the things that I do to get your house sold. Basically, it comes down to still that if it looks like it's something that they don't want for that price in that neighborhood, they're still not going to come and look at it. It doesn't matter what I do. And, I had to have a hard talk like that with one of the sellers this week, because basically the bottom line is that when she put it on the market, I told her the value was right around $500,000. And that's where we needed to be. And I actually suggested that we're under 500 because we're going to get that for people that are looking between 4 and 5 and that kind of thing as well. Well, she came back to me and she told me that we need to price the property at 550. And first she said 535, and I said, well, and then I came back to her and I said, you still haven't signed the paperwork. She said, I'll sign it at 550. Okay, that's 10% above the market. And so it's been on the market for 60 days now, no showings, and there's nothing I can do about it. I can do an open house. I have nobody coming. So it's a waste of my time. It's a waste of the seller's time. It's a waste of everybody's time in regards to what's going on. And there's a new house that came on the market by an investor that has completely renovated the house, completely. Same floor plan, same everything of this house. Cookie cutter, kind of neighborhood. The house was built in 2020. So obviously not even that old or anything like that. So there's not a lot that somebody's going to do, but they did put new carpet in it. They've painted it, all of those kinds of things. So it's just move-in ready. Everything's ready to go. And guess where they priced it at? $489. That's what they priced it at. The investor did. And the other houses that have sold in that neighborhood, that it's actually a golf community. One of them was on a golf course, another one was on a pond, and they both sold for under $500. So the bottom line is this lady's house that is not on a golf course, not on a pond, is not going to sell for $550. And you're not going to get anybody in to see it. People have too many choices of what to look at now. When you've got so many choices of what to look at, you're going to look at what you want, and you're going to look at what's in that price point. When people are desperate saying, hey, I've got to look at everything because there's not enough inventory, and maybe this one is a good one and I'll make a lower offer, they're not going to do it. So she did lower the price. She didn't lower the price to where it really needs to be. And so still at this point, I can't get anybody in it because it's too high. So it kind of comes down to when you're advertising something that people don't want, they're not going to come and see it. There's no reason to come and see it. And so that it doesn't have anything that it's going to stick out there. And so basically when it comes down to it, we need to, operate within the market optimally the best way that we can, which we definitely will do that. But in this market, with the amount of inventory and everything that we have, you need to be priced right to get the market going, to get the properties where you want to have it, to get that property sold. And if you don't want to sell it, then there's no reason to waste anybody's time. But when you do want to sell it, then that's something that you want to do. Now, whether or not this lady will take the market value, I did send her an offer today, this week, that somebody gave her an offer that was one of those subject to offers. I have given her cash offers that would make it. So it just comes down to, does she really want to sell? And that's kind of what the bottom line is that as a seller, you need to decide, do you really want to sell? And if you do, then you need to do what's necessary to make it happen. But in order to get in touch with us, you can call or text 407-566-2555. You can find us online at centralfloridarealestateradio.com, and we'll see you after the break. Welcome back, everybody. This is Laura Peterson, your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold, Guaranteed Realty, and to discuss the sale of your home, you can call or text 407-566-2555. That's 407-566-2555. So I wanted to talk to everybody today about the Amendment 3 that's going to be on the ballot this year in November. And so I'm going to be talking about this every off and on before the election, just to make sure that everybody's aware of it, knows what it is, knows a little bit about it in regards to what it is, because when you get to the ballot, what it's going to be is it's going to be one paragraph, and you're going to be, what does this really mean? And that's usually what happens. So nothing has happened yet. It is on the ballot in November. It has a 60% passage. 60% need to vote for it in order for it to pass. And basically what it would do, it would raise the homestead exemption from $50,000 to $250,000 over 2 years, but only on the non-school portion of your tax bill. So you don't have to worry. It's not going to affect the schools at all. The schools are still going to be protected. It's on everything else. So it cuts the assessment cap on investment and commercial property from 10% to 5% a year that they can increase. And it adds a 5-year residency waiting period for new Floridians and locks local governments into a fixed list of things they're allowed to spend property tax money on. So, again, nothing has changed yet. It needs 60% voter approval on November 3rd. So, basically, how we got here is that in February 19th of 2026, the Florida House passed a bill and to phase it out. And then in March, the regular section, it died because the Senate didn't pass it. Then in the spring, they did a special session to go through all of this stuff. And then in May, Governor DeSantis issued the proclamation calling of a June specialist session, which they did in June. And then in June 2nd, they passed the House 75-26, and the Senate passed it 30-9. Plus there's a companion bill and everything too. So now the voters need to decide by 60% in November. And the first exemption is in 2027, which will take it to 150,000 of a deduction if approved. And then in 2028, it takes it to 250,000 is what happens. And then from 2029 plus or to 2028 plus, actually, it continues. So basically, so here are the provisions. So the first one is the homestead exemption increase. So it exempts the first 250,000 of a homestead's value from taxation for all levies other than the school district levies, and requires the legislature to prescribe a schedule for full elimination. So like we said, 2027 is 150,000, 2028 and above is 250,000. So the two-step phase in and the inflation indexing aren't spelled out in the summary voters read. The amendment authorizes future legislature to create a uniform procedure letting counties, municipalities, and special districts exempt assessed value all the way up to 100% with no additional voter approval required. There's no deadline for when that legislature has to act and no clarity on how much discretion the localities would have. So there is a core services category lock, which restricts county and municipal ad valorem revenue to 7 allowable categories. Obviously, public safety is one of them, which is law enforcement, fire service, EMS, all of those kinds of things, education and schools, infrastructure, finances, and refinance, which is roads, bridges, stormwater control, natural resource projects, including flood control, local bonds and debt service on existing obligations is excluded, retirement benefits for local government employees, and operations and administration of county officers, commissioners, and municipalities. Non-homestead assessment cap cut. This reduces the annual assessment growth cap on non-homesteaded property. So second homes, rentals, commercial real estate. Now the cap is at 10%. So if you buy a property and your taxes are, say, $5,000, or let's say 10, because that makes it easier, it can go up to 11,000 the next year because it can go up 10%. But if it can only go up to 10.5 because it's a 5% cap. So this gives this is a sleeper provision for the investor audience. So homesteaded properties under Save Our Homes is capped at a 3% or the consumer price index. So non-homestead would sit at 5%, 2 points above the homestead cap, which I think that's really good. So it caps assessments, not millage rates. A local government can still raise the millage rate. So this is an interesting thing, I think, which is the 5-year residency requirement. So provided that this passes, then that means that if you would want to purchase a home by the end of December to be able to homestead it for 2026. Basically like that is what it comes down to. So anyone establishing residency after January 1st, 2027 must maintain residency for 5 years before qualifying for the expanded exemption. Someone who buys and homesteads in 2027 pays under the current system until year 5. So that's a $50,000 basically exemption and instead of the 250 exemption. So it's a big difference between somebody buying their house in December and buying their house in January. So basically, so the unresolved question, so it doesn't define what establishing for Florida residency means for people who don't own a property. Florida's homestead statutes uses permanent residence language that refers to property owners. A longtime Florida renter with a driver's license, voter registration, and vehicle tag may find they haven't established residency in the amendment's sense until they buy by the end of 2026. So that would mean that you don't necessarily need to buy a home, but it's not clear. And so basically when it comes down to it, I think that that's something that you should definitely look at, consider, know what the scoop is basically in that and all of that kind of stuff. So in my mind, when I read it, that says to me that you have to own a property by December of 2026 in order to get the Florida residency, requirements that you need for 2027. Now, if you're new to Florida, that's absolutely true. If you're a lifelong resident, born in Florida and everything, and you've been renting, how is that going to affect you? That's unclear. And so the way to make sure that you take advantage of it, if it passes in November, then you've got basically a few weeks to get a house under contract to get it closed by the end of the year. So I think that it's on, what did I say? November 2nd is when I think November 3rd is actually when the election is. So say that the election happens on November 3rd and November 4th, everybody knows that this passed. And so it could be a mad rush, especially if you've been in Florida less than 5 years, that you need to go ahead and buy a house by the end of December to take advantage of $150,000 in 2027 and $250,000 from there on. Otherwise, you have to wait 5 years to make that happen. You would still get that $50,000, but you're not going to get the rest of it. So, in addition to that, there is a millage rate ceiling that basically that requires 2/3 vote of the governing body that can go up to 110% of the rolled back. So I don't understand that 100%. Basically is what it's going to do. So what they're looking at statewide, so the Revenue Estimating Conference, which includes principalities from the governor's office, the legislature, the Office of Economic and Demographic Research, puts recurring costs roughly at $12 billion. That figure covers $250,000 exemption and 10% versus 5% cap. It does not include the cost of fully eliminating non-school homestead tax. So in 2027, which everybody will get the $150,000, the total revenue reduction to the counties and everybody looks like it's going to be $165 million. In 2028, $275 million. So basically, where that's gonna how that's gonna affect Orange County property dollars, where they currently go, 51% goes to public safety, fire, rescue, corrections, and the sheriff. 19% goes to community care and affordable housing. 8% goes to internal operations. 5% goes to transportation, Links and Sunrail. 5% goes to constitutional offices, excluding the sheriff, and 5% goes to reserves. So basically, that says that the Florida League of City estimates municipalities would lose nearly 38% of property tax revenue on average under the full homestead elimination. County revenue loss under that scenario ranges from 2 to 24%, depending on the county. So here are the cases for and cases against, okay? So, Florida homeowners have absorbed enormous assessed value growth since 2020, and this is the largest property tax cut in state history. The exemption is real, permanent, and inflation protected, not a one-year rebate. The 10% to 5% cap gives investors and small business owners genuine protection against assessment spikes, which no prior platform did. The millage ceiling provision makes it harder for local governments to quietly backfill by raising rates. School funding is explicitly protected. The exemption doesn't touch school levels. The category forces local governments to prioritize police, fire, EMS, roads, and stormwater over discretionary spending, and property tax relief polls with broad bipartisan support. So the case against it goes that the revenue has to come from somewhere. The Tax Foundation argues eliminating this much of the base doesn't reduce the cost of services. It just shifts the burden onto everything still taxable, including higher millage on non-homesteaded property. The Florida Chamber of Commerce warned that state leaders before the session that shifting burden into non-homesteaded property will likely mean higher prices, fewer jobs, and diminished investment. Renters get nothing directly, and the landlords typically pass some of the property tax version through. Florida has about 3 million renter households. The 5-year residency rule creates a two-tier tax system based on when you bought, and Save Our Homes already protects long-term homeowners substantially. A homesteaded assessment statewide average about 50.3% below market value in regards to what the homesteaders get. It preempts local decision-making on what property taxes can fund, and future full elimination would happen without any further voter approval. Polling cited by Florida Poly Institute in January of 26 found that Florida voters prefer property insurance relief over property tax relief by nearly 2 to 1. Well, here's basically what the bottom line. Property insurance property insurance is not near as much as property taxes. When I am listening to people coming from other areas, most of the time they're surprised at how high our property taxes are. They think that they're high. And basically, when I moved here, which was 26 years ago, from Chicago, my property taxes were about the same in Chicago as they are in Florida. I don't know what they are now in Chicago. I know that because my taxes are homesteaded and everything, I am definitely in that category where I have a lot less taxes than if I bought my house today, because it's homesteaded, it's been protected and everything, and not had huge increases. And so that definitely is basically a big thing that it comes down to look at. And I think that that's something that everybody does. So one of the things to know is that Florida has not eliminated property taxes. That's one thing for sure. If it passes, it doesn't mean that you won't pay property taxes anymore, because you're still going to have the school district. It's still going to have part of the non-ad valorem and that and those kinds of things that are out there. And it is not passed. It needs to pass by the people. It doesn't only affect homeowners. The 5% non-homestead cap touches every investor, every landlord, and commercial owner in the area. And I'm a Florida resident, so I'll qualify only if you have homestead before 2027. The residency definition for non-homeowners is generally unsettled, and I would count on it to mean that you don't have it. So basically, when it comes down to it, I think that this is When I'm looking at it, I think that this is good legislation. You never know, and 100%. But this kind of gives you a good um, information in regards to both sides, in regards to what people are looking at and what's going on. And basically, when it comes down to it, the millage rate doesn't change. So basically, when you're looking at it, if a house was say 300,000 in 2020 and today it's 400,000, then what that means is that on that extra 100,000, and say the millage rate is 0.16. So on the 100,000 times 0.16, that comes out to $1,600 in taxes if the house is appraised at 100,000 more. So that 1,600 more in taxes goes to the county year in and year out because they're doing it based on the value of the homes. So when the average value of the home in 2010 was 150,000, so 150, and it might have even been less than that, times 0.16, they were getting $2,400 on that house. Today, with that house being 400,000, then and you're taking that times 0.16, the millage rate hasn't changed. That's 6,400. So the taxing authorities have been are getting 3 times the amount of what they were getting when the properties were worth 150,000. So maybe this isn't 100% the answer, but I think that it's addressing when the market has gone up, that the taxes have gone up. And so basically, maybe that's not exactly fair. Maybe it's not based on what the assessed value is. Maybe it's based on something else to figure out, what the taxes are, because that's really what the bottom line is in our area, is that when you're looking at it like that and you're like, well, how, they're losing a lot of money. Well, they gained a lot of money when the market goes up. They lose them a lot of money when the market goes down. So maybe if the taxing authority isn't based on the market and it's based on some other figure, which I don't know what that would be, but that it stayed consistent, that the taxes don't go up with the market, then that might be something to consider. Obviously it needs to go up, with the prices and all of that kind of thing. But, it's like we've had a steady climb for the last 4 or 5 years, since 2022 to today. The market has not changed. So they really haven't had a big jump, but they did have probably a 25% jump between 2020 and 2022. Did they need to have a 25% jump in the amount of taxes that they were getting? Probably not. But so that's kind of where it's going. So basically, this is something that they're looking at, and perhaps they should look at something else that would be something different. That basically would look at, instead of looking at this particular thing in regards to how we change the property taxes, which I think it's a great idea, quite honestly. But probably the better thing would be to look at the way that the taxes are calculated are not on the value of the property, but based on something else. I'm sure that when you're going back in the day and stuff like that, like properties didn't increase that much. They increased, 3 to 5% a year. When you have a year when they go up 25%, and in 2005, when I got my real estate license, they were going up 5% a month, and they did that for a good 8-10 months. So they went up 40 to 50% that year. And then they came down, and they went down more than 40 to 50%. They went down 100, they didn't go down 100% because then they wouldn't be worth anything. But the houses that were at 400,000 went down to about 150. And now they've climbed back up to 400. So that has got to be a tough road to hoe, I would think, for the governments, basically that whoever is collecting that property tax, because sometimes they're really heavy in the amount they get, and then the market goes down, and that really hurts their budget. So it comes down to, I think, really looking at this and probably what they're basing the value on. that is volatile, not real volatile, but there are times where it's volatile, that maybe that's really what we need to be looking at instead of something, instead of that. But honestly, I mean, I think this is a good thing. I think that you definitely need to look at it. I think that the 5-year thing is not necessarily a bad thing for it to kick in for the new people after 2027. But I definitely think that it could definitely give a spike to real estate if it passes for the rest of the year. And that's something everybody should really pay attention to. So this has been a really long segment, but it's a lot of good information. So in order to get in touch with us, you should call or text 407-566-2555. You can find us online at centralfloridarealestateradio.com, and we'll see you after the break. Welcome back, everybody. This is Laura Peterson, your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty, and to discuss the sale of your home, you can call or text 407-566-2555. That's 407-566-2555. So just a few minutes here left in the show, and I just wanted to go over a couple of things. One of them is that I found interesting that in June, you would wonder, well, how many new permits are there in the Orlando area for new home construction just in the month of June? And it was 1,347 permits valued at $500 million in new construction. So that basically gives you a number in regards to what's going on. Tampa, there were 2,300. Southwest Florida, 1,895. Jacksonville was 1,060, and Southeast Florida was 875. So if I take 1,347, well, I take 503 million divided by 1,347, I'm just coming up with an average price. So that comes out to 371,000 is what the per permit that basically they're talking about. So that's obviously all over the map. That's an average price of right under 400. So that kind of shows you that a lot of the permits are being done on the perimeter and everything like that. You know, in the Southeast Florida, which Miami, last week we talked about that the median price of the new construction is over $1 million. They've got basically 875 permits, about half of what we do, just a little bit over that at $400 million, and we had 1,347 at $500 million. So you can see that the amount is quite a bit higher, and that's all of Southeast Florida, not just Miami. So basically, I thought that that was interesting in regards to what's going on in Florida metros. There were nearly 7,500 new home permits in June. So that's just the month of June. So I thought that was good. The last thing that I wanted to mention to everybody is I talked a little bit in the tax that some people think that the insurance is too high, and that's something that should be done. And that's been done and being done. And Citizens prices, from what I've just read, is down about 8.8%. So that's good news. Citizens is the last resort policy, meaning that it's backed by the state and it's a big pool and everything like that, and their rates are coming down. So I think the legislature, in everything that they've done, they've really worked hard to get the insurance down. They're working on the property taxes, and the biggest thing, I think, that when you're looking at that property tax and they're talking about how much it came down, or it's going to, affect these counties and everything. And I think that that's obviously important. But my question is, how much did they gain when the market went up? And that's something that I'll look for and investigate in future shows. But in order to get in touch with us, you can call or text 407-566-2555. You can find us online at centralfloridarealestateradio.com, and we'll see you after the break.